No Nose Knows. Written by Irrespective. Chapter 3. Seeds Sown in Adversity. Baked Bean liked to think he was no stranger to formal dinners. Yes, it was true that he never attended one as a guest, but he was the go-to waiter whenever the mayor of Salt Lake had decided to use his restaurant for important visiting delegations during his youth. Thus, it logically followed to him that he would have a bit of an upper hoof when it came to eating formal dinners, especially since he knew how to use a fork, how to place a napkin, where to place his elbows, and what part of an individual course to eat first, second, third, and last. So he thought that attending an as formal as it gets with Luna and myself in attendance dinner with Celestia would be fairly straightforward. He wasn't expecting to make much small talk, he didn't have to win over any diplomats, and he wasn't going to have his words dissected under a microscope by ponies who were itching to make power plays. He actually felt confident about attending dinner, especially with what happened after Celestia's hey joke. She had invited him on a personal, private tour of the palace to make up for making him snort tea, and the tour had been captivating, to put it simply. She had been kind during the walk, and she was even kinder in her explanations of the history behind the baubles and trinkets that now rested on the plush velvets and marble pillars. He had been mesmerized by the overabundance of artifacts and the history behind all of them, and Celestia had seemed pleased that she was so interested in these trinkets from a bygone era. When she had shown him to his room in the North Tower, he had felt an air of relaxing ease for the first time that day, and with said ease, he dared to entertain the notion that he could get through dinner without too much trouble. He was now regretting ever having such thoughts. It had started out, innocently enough, as most descents into madness do. Celestia had escorted him from his room when the evening meal was ready, and the dining room was as grand as he expected it to be. The soft and relaxing light that filtered into the room through the large windows, coupled with the decorative curtains and stained glass windows, calmed his nerves, and the smile he received from Celestia put his mind at ease. After sitting near the middle of the long table that ran through the center of the room, Celestia had selected a seat 3 chairs to his right, and she cheerfully called for dinner to be served. And then it had gone downhill. Quickly. It started when Luna barged through the door, startling poor Bean and making him jump nearly out of his seat. Each of her hoof falls were loud and solid, and after she flung herself down into the chair that was directly across from him, she leaned forward and proceeded to stare at him. The Princess of the Moon didn't need to blink, it seemed, and it seriously creeped Bean out. Her gaze remained fixated on him through the first course, but she made no attempts of communication. Celestia had quickly become distracted as her personal secretary had walked in with fried turnips and had laid out several books, scrolls, and other loose papers in the space around her. From what he could hear, they were trying to clear her schedule for tomorrow so she could review her own alicorn law and undo what had been done, so she didn't notice how intimidating Luna was being. Or perhaps the Princess of the Night always glared at every pony, but that seemed rather unlikely. Then the second course was served. It was indeed a rather nice rosemary salad, and Bean was able to enjoy 2 or 3 bites of it. He tried, for a few moments, to think of how he would describe it to some pony who had never eaten it. Subtly infused, perhaps, and strikingly balanced, with undertones of quiet restraint and delicate touch. And then he looked up. Luna was still glowering at him, and her seething rage seemed to be set to a broil. She was angrily stabbing her salad, shoving large bites into her mouth, and then chewing the poor, hapless greens with extreme prejudice, dark purpose, and even with her mouth open. And for a brief, horrible moment, Baked Bean feared that Princess Luna might want to add a certain yellow stallion into the greens for some variety. So now he sat, his fork idly twirling in the salad as he tried to avoid eye contact with the butcher of red leaf lettuce and possibly baked beans. With her fuming over there like she was, his appetite had decided it was going to vacate the premises without leaving a forwarding address, and there was simply no way to enjoy the food. It was going to be a terrible shame if dessert was something delicious and he had to turn it down. Maybe he could throw it at Luna as a distraction if she tried to gobble his backside.
What if we move the ambassador to 9:15, and then the mayor's round table to 10:30?
Celestia's voice drifted over. I'm afraid you have from 10 to 11 blocked out for your class. Ah, yes, I'd hate to deprive my students of the opportunity to dissect a worm. She chuckled. Maybe you could dissect me, Bean idly thought. It would save Luna a fortune in eye drops. What if you moved? Bean found his ears focusing in on a rather loud chewing sound, one that did not sound like Luna's mouthy mangling. It sounded more like popcorn? I knew it! Luna roared in the royal Canterlot voice. Before Bean really had a chance to figure out what she was shouting about, he found himself enveloped in her magic, flung across the room at near terminal velocity, and then slammed rather satisfyingly against the wall with enough force to nearly make him two-dimensional. The secretary screamed, Celestia finally looked up from the paperwork before her, and Bean heard a new voice laughing uproariously. I knew thou wert in league with our enemies. Sister, quickly! Thou shouldst distract the Jaquaniquus while I deal with his inept assistant. Luna, put him down, Celestia commanded. Discord is reformed now, remember? Oh no, please. The new voice that can only be Discord replied with howling laughter. If it means you'll keep scrubbing the wall with Mr. Bean, then I'm as bad as they get. Please, let him have it. I want to see if he's filled with jelly beans, or if you'll simply refry him. Luna, now, Celestia ordered. But he's using this diversion to gain the upper hoof on us, Luna protested. Stop! Stop! Discord wailed as he rolled on the floor. My tummy! I can't take it. He is not doing anything of the sort. Either of them, Celestia shouted. Look! Discord is rolling on the floor and Bean is turning purple. Bean wondered how true that statement was as the world began to blurry and go dark. But then he wondered why oxygen was so essential for the sustainment of life. Thankfully, Luna seemed to finally notice that the only chaos being generated in this room was by herself. So he gently set Bean on the floor and retreated back a few steps. What are you doing here, Discord? Celestia demanded as her magic now gently picked up the battered Bean and began floating him towards her. Are you kidding me? Discord replied as he snagged Bean in midair and hugged him tightly with his arm. This perfect little pony is going to be my new best friend. You wouldn't believe that wonderfully chaotic vibes that are just oozing out of him. Could you not squeeze me so hard? Bean moaned softly. My ribs. How can this cur be imitating anything other than idiocy? Luna asked. Ah, my deliciously dark ruler, that's where the fun really is, he replied, and then he gave Bean Mane a playful ruffle. This delightful little maniac right here has managed to create more chaos in the last 12 hours than I could in a month of Sundays. Tell me to stay away from such a wonderful source of chaos is like telling Fluttershy not to talk to cute little animals. A small image of Fluttershy then appeared in the space between Discord and Celestia, but she promptly frowned at Discord and shook her head in disappointment. You know what, on second thought, let's not bring her into this. Discord snapped and the image disappeared. But look at the readings, they're off the charts here. He suddenly donned a lab coat and safety glasses, and from behind his back he pulled out what looked like a thermometer mounted to a board. The bulb at the top was pulsing and pounding like it would burst at any moment, and Discord tapped it with an emphasis to the point. By activating that nose clause in your manifesto, he managed to create enough energy to power a new small city in the Chaos Zone that I'm going to name Discord Land. It's simply impossible for me not to be around. I have to see this firsthand, or paw, or claw, whatever. Celestia's magic again wrapped around Bean, and she gently lifted him out of Discord's grasp before replying. Discord, while I'm quite sure you are correct with all this talk of chaos generation, you do understand that this situation is unintentional and temporary. That is the only sad part of this whole affair. If you find that loophole you're after, then my fun will end. And just think of all the poor residents of Discord Land. Where will they get their power from when the chaos runs out? Discord, this is a private affair, Celestia replied in a low and threatening tone. I graciously ask you to allow it to remain so until the matter can be settled. Then you may return and laugh at me at your leisure. Oh, I'm going to hold you to that one, Sally. He smiled wickedly. But if you insist, I'll leave. I am rather late for a tea-time appointment with Fluttershy anyway. She was expecting me to be there quite some time ago. But understand that you won't be able to keep me away if this chaos continues, and I simply must be at the wedding. Perhaps I could be your ring bearer. I would be oh so careful. Really. He demonstrated his ability to do so by producing a red velvet pillow with a snap and a ring with a comically oversized stone on top. Immediately followed, however, he promptly managed to lose his grip on the pillow, and the ring bounced once when it hit the floor before disappearing. Discord simply offered a sheepish smile to this and then snapped again to make the pillow disappear. I'll keep that in mind, Discord, but please, not a word of this to another breathing soul. Always such a downer, Sally. He pouted. Fine. My lips are sealed. He then slithered up next to her and threw a clawed arm over her withers. But I'm going to keep any innuendos you use. Those things are gold. Roll in the hay, indeed. And then, with an echoing laugh and a snap of his claw, he disappeared. Bean was finally allowed back on the ground, but he grunted in pain when his weight settled on his hooves again. Are you all right? Celestia asked. I've been better. He groaned as he reached a hoof up to rub his ribs. Both he and Celestia then turned to glare at Luna. Oops, she offered sheepishly. Fool. Foolish fool. Bean winced as he moved to sit at the desk in his room. Despite being checked out and cleared by royal doctors and Celestia, it still hurt like Tartarus to breathe, walk, talk, and even blink. Idiotic, foolish fool. He never should have left. He shouldn't have come to Canterlot. Every pony who had tried to talk him out of the trip had been so right about everything, and he had been so wrong. You're just having a moment, Bean murmured the acidic words he had heard before leaving. You'll see, your place is here with us. You won't find out what you're after there. It was a shame that he was just realizing how they had been right. If only he had listened. If he just stayed home. He scoffed at himself. If he hadn't had the ridiculous notion to run away from what he really was in effort to find some illusion of what he thought he was, he wouldn't be where he was now. He'd be safely tucked away from this nightmare. There would be no Princess Luna, who had no qualms about squishing him under hoof. No crazy half-pony, half-dragon, half-whatever he was, who would give him a serious case of the heebie-jeebies. And no ancient law that forced him to marry Princess Celestia, so he wouldn't undo 1,000 years of progress. He was a nit-witted clod, pure and simple. He flipped open his notebook and glared at the words he'd written. They had seemed like his friends when he'd penned them, eager and willing to take everything he ever wanted and not be judged for it. Now they felt like spiteful enemies, laughing and frolicking in his misery. It was as if they knew they were responsible for his current situation, and they weren't sorry in the slightest. They mocked him, reveling in his predicament. They held no mercy in their graphite souls. Imbecile, he grumbled. The page holding his description of the train station was worse than trash and deserved oblivion. He hated himself, what he'd become. He hated what he'd done. If only he had listened. It was a shame it took a forced marriage and a near-death experience to finally convince him that writing was not his future. He then flipped over to the thesaurus Celestia let him borrow, intent on finding synonyms for idiot so he could have new ways to berate himself. He paused for a moment, though, as his hoof ran along the outer edge of his mind and went back to their private conversation. All ponies see from the light where they stand, Mr. Bean. To most of my subjects, I am the wise and graceful princess who raises the sun and brings prosperity to our fair kingdom. To my student, I am a teacher who enjoys sharing deep magics and ancient history. To the rulers of other nations, I am a shrewd diplomat and a skillful negotiator. To Princess Cadence, I am an aunt. To Luna, I am a sister. And to Shining Armor, I am a military commander. Now that you've met me and seen me as I truly am, you have to reconcile what you thought with what you know now. You know that I'm not perfect, and that I made some rather serious blunders in my early years. You know that even the Princess of the Sun can mess things up. It takes time to make those reconciliations, and each pony does it in their own way. He paused for a moment more. Her unbidden words continued to rattle in his head for a moment, and he felt a, certain warmth to them. Somehow, they had the power to burn clean through the miasma of depression that had settled onto his shoulders, and he felt his spirit slowly begin to rise. Everything had seemed so serene at that point, so sure. It was the mood, the feel of her words that made the greatest impact. It was like she was just being Celestia, nothing more. No princess, no son, no official duties. It had felt nice, and dare he say, normal even. It was almost like she wanted to be just Celestia. She wanted to hold a plain, boring, regular conversation. Even though they had been talking about the preconceived notions, it was the pony, not the princess, who stood to gain the most from their shared moment. Somehow in his musings, his pencil had slid out from his mouth, and he chewed on the end as he thought for a moment. He then pushed the thesaurus to one side, squared away his notebook, and began writing. "But why all this secrecy, my dear Celeste? Why hide behind the mask of illusion and deception?"
"Because, my sweet, it is those very masks that allow me to accomplish the greatest good. I cannot move the world as just Celeste. I must be more than that. Within these cloaks I can leverage the power needed to bring to pass everything and defeat all who would oppose the crown."
"But at what cost, my love? Why destroy everything that makes you so unique? I cannot bear to watch you bury yourself, so heedless to the shell that it is turning you into."
"Don't you see, my sweet? In my emptiness is their foundation. Sacrifice has always been the great enabler in our world. One must give all they have, down to the very dregs, to claim the loyalty of those who serve around and beneath them. They would gain because of my loss, and I would never have it any other way. Ponies may see me in a certain way, but in that way lies the greater good."
A light tapping on his door broke his thoughts, and he spat out the pencil before calling out the knocker to enter. He wasn't surprised when Celestia opened the door with her magic. He had figured she would want to check up on him after cleaning up the mess in the dining hall.
"Hello, Mr. Bean. I was just wanted to stop in to see how you were recovering."
"I think I'm doing better," he replied, and he rolled one arm slightly with a wince. "I'm probably going to be sore for a while, though."
"I imagine you would be. You did take a fair amount of abuse. Is there something I can get you to help with the pain?"
"No, I just think I need a rest and take it easy tomorrow." Celestia nodded.
"That would be quite beneficial. Before I interrupted your day in the gardens, what did you have planned for tomorrow?"
He shrugged and sighed. "I don't think I really had any plans. If I did, I've completely forgotten what they were."
"I see,"
she replied softly, and her gaze moved around the room.
"Are your furnishings to your tastes? Do you have enough blankets? I sometimes think this tower is cold even in the summer months, and the last weather schedule I saw indicated there would be a light breeze tonight."
"Everything is fine, Your Highness. I appreciate your attentiveness, but I believe I have everything I need." Bean's heart broke a little when she saw her diplomatic smile falter ever so slightly.
"Well, I'm glad for that. I apologize if I have disturbed your evening. I will trouble you no more, and—"
"No! Wait!" he called out as she turned to leave. He then felt a burning in his cheeks as she looked at him again. "I mean, you don't have to go yet. Maybe you could explain to me why Luna acted the way she did." Her smile became a bit more genuine, and with it, Bean's cheerfulness grew.
"I can try to, if that will suffice."
"Please." He then stood and offered her a chair. She graciously sat in it, though she just barely fit on the cushion, and Bean had moved to sit on the bed.
"Luna is, well, very focused," Celestia offered. "This is mostly a good thing, but sometimes she gets a notion in her head that just won't leave, and she'll become obsessed with it."
Bean somehow caught the unspoken implication that this obsession had been a rather large factor in the Nightmare Moon problem.
"She is usually very accepting of other ponies, especially since—"
Celestia paused and inhaled.
"Especially since her return from exile. For her special inflict bodily harm is very uncharacteristic for her, but I think she did so because she worries about me. She's a wonderful sister in that way, and she'll grow to accept you too. Just don't try to assassinate me and we should be fine."
"That's about the dumbest decision I could ever make," he chuckled. "And what about the freaky, mixed up, whatever he was?"
"That was Discord, a Draconicus. You may remember him from such historical events such as taking over Equestria and stealing the element of harmony. Luna and I turned him into a stone 1,000-odd years ago.
She shook her head with a long-suffering way but smiled.
He's reformed now, but he is still the Lord of Chaos, and it would have been more of a surprise if he hadn't shown up at some point tonight. He practically bathed in this kind of confusion I caused today by touching your nose.
That's a pleasant image. He laughed with her. So, if he's the Lord of Chaos, do you represent order?
I suppose I do,
she replied, and then she snickered.
You know, 1,000+ years ago, I never dreamed I would be a representative of so many things. I just wanted peace and harmony for all ponies, nothing more. I didn't see myself as the standard of order, or the eternal and perfect princess. I still don't, in all honesty. All I really see when I look in the mirror is Celestia, the now very old mare who was given a kingdom.
So, is that how we get out of this marriage? I mean, compared to you, I'm like a newborn foal still.
That would be rather convenient, but since I am biologically near the same age as you, I don't think that will work.
Well, it's worth looking into, right?
It is. I will include that in my research.
Bean gave a short little laugh, then sighed and rubbed one arm with the other hoof in the awkward way. Princess, I know I've said it before, but I really am grateful for everything you've done today. You've been very understanding and accommodating, and I'm sure you canceled quite a few meetings in order to spend the afternoon with me.
1 or 2, perhaps,
she replied slyly.
Spending the afternoon with you is far more enjoyable, though. All of my ministers seem to have collected a fair amount of dust, it seems, so it was rather refreshing to talk to you about Starstrol's staff of serendipity, as opposed to yet another presentation on why we should abandon the gold standard.
I really enjoyed your tour before dinner, too. All those artifacts you showed me were really neat, especially that brass hydra thing with 5 heads. If you do ever give out the princess gig, you'd make a great tour guide. She smiled a bit deeper and nodded to indicate her praise. So, thank you again. I wish I had a better way of saying it, but I don't.
I think you will find this to be useful in helping you with that.
She tapped the thesaurus with a hoof, but then she noticed his notepad.
Oh, is this what you've been writing?
Yeah, it's not much of anything at the moment.
May I be permitted to read it?
Baked Bean in any other place and time would have answered that question with a resounding no. He was still too self-conscious about his words, still too scared about his choices of phrases to let another pony read his uneducated hash would be akin to asking him to sing the Lunar Overture while trying to grow a tomato plant and tap dancing in a vat of oatmeal chicken for his backup chorus to a sold-out Bridal Way theater. But as he looked at Celestia to properly deliver his rejection, his eyes went straight to hers. Somehow, in that sea of magenta, he felt his inhibitions dissolve and his concerns melt away. It was like his breath caught in his throat, and in those majestic pools of light somehow, he found himself. He had no idea how, or even why he felt such feelings, but they were there all the same. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly home. I would be honored to have you read my work. Celestia positively beamed at him, and he could only think of 1 or 2 other times where he had seen such a deep smile filled with as much pure joy. That smile could melt the coldest heart in seconds. She reverently picked up his notebook with her hooves, and her mouth moved a little as she read it to herself.
This is a fair description of the train station, if I may say,
she offered for a moment.
You have captured the feel of it quite nicely. Why did you write it?
I was hoping somebody would use that in the travel brochure, or something like that.
Ah, I see. Did you not write about the gardens?
I didn't get a chance to, he laughed. I'm afraid somebody's nose interrupted my musing.
I will have to have a word with that pony,
she offered with a wink while continuing to read.
I would like to see what you write about when you do pen the words.
I'd love to show you. Oh, she gasped with a grin.
Celeste,
Not very original, is it?
Perhaps, but it works for now. What I would want to know is why Celeste is sacrificing for. Is it for a worthy cause, or is she needlessly throwing away her happiness?
That's one of the problems with my writing. I can get a couple of good scenes here and there, but then I can't connect them together. I have to struggle with the journey between the main plot points. I need to be less random.
What you have here is interesting and a good start,
She replied.
Let me see. I once thought I could be an actress, and I fancied that I had some theater skills. Let me try this.
She put a hoof to her chest, cleared her throat, and then turned her head to the side in an anguished dramatic pose.
Don't you see, my sweet, in my emptiness is the foundation,
She quoted in a soft, complimentive, and slightly anguished voice.
Sacrifice has always been the great enabler of our world. One must give all they have down to the very dregs to claim the loyalty of those who serve around and beneath them. They gain because of my loss, and I would never have it any other way. My ponies may see me in a certain way, but in that way lies the greater good.
Wow, Bean whispered in wide-eyed awe. Celestia had completely nailed how he had envisioned that scene in his head. Her voice had held the nobleness of station, and yet the emptiness of loftiness, the desire of the forsaken that was slowly being swallowed by the numbness of the unattainable. He had no idea his words could carry such pathos.
How was that?
She asked sincerely.
Too much over the top? Perhaps it was meant to be a bit lighter? A bit more devious?
Bean shook his head. No, you were dead on. That captured the scene I envisioned perfectly. And Princess Celestia, Diarch of the Kingdom of Equestria, inspiration and guide to millions across the vast land, standard bearer of the order and mayor of the morning, blushed furiously.
Well,
She stammered, her pleased embarrassment obvious in both vocal tone and body language. She put a notebook back on the table and then patted it gently with a hoof.
The source material really helps. You set the mood. I simply vocalized it.
Bean nodded dumbly. It was debatable if he'd ever heard her.
Well,
Celestia suddenly stood, thus breaking the trance. Bean stood too quickly too as Celestia moved towards the open door.
thank you again, Bean, for letting me read that, but it really is getting late.
It is, he hastily agreed.
And I have a lot of work to do in the morning so I can review that law.
Naturally, the words fumbled out of his mouth.
And I'm quite sure you are exhausted.
To a degree.
And so I will bid you a good night and leave you to your evening.
Thank you, he concluded at nearly the same time she did. Celestia had stepped out of the room, but she turned in the hallway to face him again.
As for tomorrow, you're free to leave the palace grounds if you wish.
Really? He asked, the surprise in his voice obvious. Celestia nodded.
Of course. Just come back and check in with me after the afternoon sometimes. I think I can trust you.
Thank you, he replied with a small smile.
Also, if you would like to join me for breakfast tomorrow, I would be delighted to host you. I like to make pancakes, and if you ask nicely, I might even put a silly fruit face on them.
Bean laughed slightly at this. What time?
Just after sunrise.
I'll consider it. How's that? He asked, and Celestia brightened.
That's all I can ask. Good night, Bean.
Good night, Celestia. She then quietly trotted away. Bean softly closed the door, moved to the desk, and flipped the pages back to his train station description. Perhaps they were not so foolish after all. The words had become meaningful to him again, somehow, and he almost felt like when he had become inspired to become a writer. He'd keep them for now. Maybe there was some home for them. He would still need a job when Celestia found that loophole after all, but as he switched off the light and crawled into the bed, one thought kept replaying in his head, and it made him smile. She called me Bean. Princess Celestia cheerfully walked towards her own chambers, a happy nonsense tune on her lips and a slight spring in her step. Her conversation with Big Bean had been delightful and...
Oh, good evening, Twilight,
she hastily said after her vision cleared of Lavender. She really wished her most faithful student wouldn't just appear like that.
Princess Celestia, good evening,
Twilight replied. Celestia was suddenly very grateful that she had centuries of diplomatic skill to help her keep her from laughing at her protege. Twilight was wearing a black turtleneck sweater, but had the neck portion pulled up and over her muzzle.
Would it be fair to guess to say that you're here to access the royal archives as part of the request I sent you earlier? Yes, but I did have one question I wanted to ask you.
Celestia mentally braced herself.
And what is that? In the wide, wide world of Equestria, what are you thinking?
Twilight shouted. Though she was trying to look angry, Celestia could find nothing but humor since being able to only see Twilight's eyes made it hard to take her seriously.
And when were you going to tell me about this law? I've been running around this whole time with the possibility of having to marry the first stallion who bonks my nose? Why would you even write a law like this?
Well, Twilight, Celestia began as she smiled sincerely and stopped herself from rolling her eyes.
It was a very long time ago, and...
there we go. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Nose Nose, I think out of all the romance series I'm reading so far, has to be one of my favorites. It's just so well paced. I love Baked Bean as a character. He's just a normal guy. Just a normal dude. I love him. But who's not normal are my wonderful donators. In fact, they are fantastic. Thank you, Chase the Master and Texture. I really do appreciate your support for such a small channel. My Discord will be down below, and if you're looking for saucier content, you can also look at my Patreon for free. This has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.